think the key is, you know, what Shakespeare said, the play's the thing. And that's what really interested me more than anything else, and the ghost story aspect of it. These people trapped at the bottom of the ocean for 100 some odd years, and then they arise to seek revenge on the people who did them in. To me, that's a fun story to tell.
David called me and he said, hey, you know, we're gonna meet writers on this project, this remake of The Fog, and I think you'd be really great for it. You know, if you are so inclined, why don't you come up with a take?
The screenwriter of The Fog, Cooper Lane, is a really talented young man and came up with several pages of ideas about The Fog, and they were really terrific.
Once they decided that they liked the take that I presented to them, then they basically said, go away and write that. Okay, which is, you know, it's kind of nice. You know, there weren't a bunch of notes, there weren't a bunch of, you know, try this, try that. It was like, go write it, and then let us read it, and then we'll talk about it after that.
So it was like a menu. We just sort of decided to buy a little of this and buy a little of that. And he did a fabulous job of keeping the essential story, essential I say, but really changing it quite a bit.
Hell of a fog paint.
We hadn't even finished the script, and I kept saying, you know, we should hire a director, get a director right on this right away, because inevitably a director comes in and changes things, so get it over with at the beginning, you know?
Rupert was brought on. We were about, I guess, around page 30 in the original script. I mean, not in the original script, but in my original draft, we were around page 30 when Rupert came on board.
Cooper had already been working on the script for, I guess, 2 months by the time I came on, and he had written. The first scene was originally about 12 or 15 pages of the guys rowing out to the Elizabeth Dane and torching it and rowing away. And then we would go and we would watch the rest of the movie. Now, I really liked that. That's what drew that's what drew me into the whole movie. But Cooper had a point that if we gave away too much in the beginning, that the audience, there would be no mystery.
Now what happens is the movie starts in a much more of an innocuous way. We know something weird happened, but we don't know exactly what it was. And then it takes us through into the beginning of Act 3 until we actually really learn what these townspeople did to the lepers, you know, 100 years ago. And all of a sudden, hopefully, everything that we've been introduced to up to that point in the story begins to make sense.
Something definitely happened in 1871. What turned it all around?
One of the things that I decided was that it wasn't enough just to have a horror story where ghosts come back for a gold cross. I mean, it's fun, but why do ghosts want a gold cross? What are they going to do with it? So I always felt there had to be something more that they were after.
In the original movie, that Jamie Lee Curtis character just kind of shows up. She's a hitchhiker. She has no real destination. She's just on her way from point A to point B, and she happens along this town. In our movie, Elizabeth, which is the Maggie Grace character, she comes back because she's been haunted by these images that she's seen in a dream. And so, you know, she's got a reason to be back as opposed to, you know, a person who's just passing through.
One of the main things that I wanted to do was explore the idea of Elizabeth going on this totally unique journey and basically being so that Blake was reaching out to find the love of his life. So in a sense, adding romance to it and adding this sort of blurring between the two worlds, it seems to me much more likely that ghosts will come back for a person that they're in love with, rather than a piece of gold. So the first thing I did was persuade Cooper not to write that in the first draft, because I knew that the first draft would have so many notes all over it that if we put it in the first draft that it would never survive. So what I did was, once I'd persuaded him that this was a good idea, he wrote the first draft and we deliberately left that out, so that when we had it in the second draft, when the studio had a lot of their notes addressed, this new idea was in there and everybody fell in love with it.
The interesting thing is, when trying to create characters in a horror movie, is that you try to make the best, richest, funniest, you know, smartest, dumbest, wherever your emphasis is, character that you can, right? And then you turn those pages in, and the studio reads the pages, and the studio says, okay, this is great character stuff. We really love these characters. However, these 5 pages in here that we've devoted towards character development and character need to be scary.
It killed them. The fog killed them.
I had a certain idea about how to how to go about making the fog be a character. And of course, everything changes as it goes along. But that was kind of the angle that we were all on at the time.
The fog is a central character to the piece. In the original, they weren't able to manipulate the fog the way we can do it now. But nobody wanted the fog to be, nobody wanted characters made out of fog, but we did want the fog to actually have a life of its own and to be able to, you know, sabotage the generator, make, you know, cause Selma Blair's character's car to crash, and to be central, not only what comes out of the fog, but for the fog to be a central character in the movie. How do you basically, you know, write to animate something that is inanimate, like fog? It was hard for me to write that. It's hard for me to write, I don't know what the fog looks like, but yet it's doing stuff, right? So I had to make a leap in my own mind of how I saw what the fog would do. So in my mind, the fog probably was a little more animate than in Rupert's mind, or maybe even in the studio's mind. So we started with the fog, you know, really able to do a lot of things that regular fog wouldn't be able to do. And then we had to scale that back bit by bit by bit so that eventually what it does is believable, and there's rules, but what's within the fog, that's where the danger lies, is what's within the fog.
It's really kind of interesting if you look at some of the bigger movies that were released, The Ring, The Grudge, they take themselves dead seriously. It's not they're not comedies. They take their stories seriously. And that's the real issue. It's not a commodity. You have to respect the story and tell it with all seriousness.
The story that I wanted to tell was Elizabeth's story as she basically went through this incredible journey and reconnected with her dead husband. Once I realized that that was my story, everything else had to fit in to support that story.
You try to lay it foundation, and then you have to take little pieces of the foundation away and move them around, and hopefully what remains is still enough so that you feel like you know who the characters are and where they've come from and where they're going. Whether we do or not, you know, it's up to the audience to decide.